This is Paige, the co-host of Giggly Squad. I use Uber Eats for everything, and I feel like people forget that you can truly order anything, especially living in New York City. It's why I love it. You can get Chinese food at any time of night, but it's not just for food. I order from CVS all the time. I'm always ordering from the grocery store. If a friend stops over, I have to order champagne. I also have this thing that whenever I travel, if I'm ever in a hotel room, I never feel like I'm missing something because I'll just Uber Eats it. The amount of times I've had to Uber Eats hair items like hairspray, deodorant, you name it, I've ordered it on Uber Eats. You can get grocery, alcohol, everyday essentials in addition to restaurants and food you love. So in other words, get almost anything with Uber Eats. Order now. For alcohol, you must be legal drinking age. Please enjoy responsibly. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews all on the app. Download today.
Hi there, and welcome again to the Explaining History podcast. I've had a kind of a tradition almost of doing a sort of like a Saturday analysis, and I think something I'm going to try to revive really. So without further ado, let's dive into it. And I think there is a kind of a clear thread that runs from 2008 to the present moment, and Trump is sort of somewhere in the middle if we're looking at kind of just America at the moment. And 2008 helps to kind of explain the coalition of capitalist forces that are sort of align themselves behind Trump. Now, it's sort of no secret the sort of person that Trump was. The surprise of 2016 was that he'd managed to kind of connect with a broad base of disaffected people across America, with kind of coded racism and this sort of nostalgia and revanchism and "Make America Great Again"ism and all that kind of stuff. But America's capitalist classes, the kind of the well-to-do, particularly of Manhattan, the kind of the elite circles, which he'd sort of always been sort of slightly rebuffed from, as a rather kind of arrivist, vulgar, stupid, kind of property huckster from the 1980s. Who was kind of exemplified all the vulgarity and the kind of the opportunism and the hyper individualism and the ruthlessness and in his case the out and out criminality of the 1980s. This was the people that sort of a bit more subtle about how they extract their wealth, viewed him as kind of rather vulgar, and Trump never really got to be part of Manhattan high society. He's the typical kind of carpetbagger who turns up and has a pile of money, but doesn't realise he's not really welcome in the circles that old money inhabits. And a lot of his kind of agenda is about forcing his way into, now that he's president, forcing his way into social acceptance in ways that he was never able to previously. and to actually, enrich himself in ways that he'd never been successful in. But the point is that a great many of kind of America's super wealthy were under no illusions about Trump. It's not like they got a nasty surprise when he came to power in 2016. Those that had backed him and that had started to fuel his and fund his campaign when it suddenly began to take off, they were people who didn't, who weren't kind of surprised by what they saw, because they knew the kind of human being he was. So it begs the question. Now we have an America now where, for example, as I previously talked about on this podcast, the American president as manager of empire, the kind of character that, say, a Lyndon Johnson or a Kennedy or a Nixon was, somebody who takes care of America's imperial business, holds together its alliances, keeps back its rivals, and monopolizes resources using the dollar as a powerful fiscal weapon to ensure an ongoing flow of wealth to America, using the dollar essentially as a kind of an unofficial global credit card. This was the kind of stuff that the managers of empire are meant to do. When you have, and this is how it happens over a very short space of time, allies like Japan and Canada being, permanently, I would say, permanently alienated by the United States of America, it's either that the American foreign policy elites have looked at the global situation and thought those alliances don't matter any longer. Perhaps the retreat now from the defense of Taiwan and the kind of the America's line, if you will, is going to be in the Pacific, because of Hawaii and Guam and Australia. It's not the kind of containment of the South in the South China Sea anymore. That's gone. So it's either that you're getting this kind of reorientation of American foreign policy, where certain alliances don't seem necessary any longer. It's hard to imagine what it is about Canada that an American president would choose to alienate. Nobody really invites hostility along one of the largest land borders in the world. All it would take in 10 or 20 years' time is for a significantly poorer Canada to decide that it wants to have all sorts of mineral relationships with China, and then you could have, and this is the sort of the way the foreign policy and defense thinkers think. They think, well, what if we have the Chinese on the other side of the border supporting Canadians, that kind of thing? Then you would have fireworks. So it's not that there is some kind of official realignment. The kind of the Trumpian realignment is all about trying to reinstall some kind of great power politics, or the kinds that you saw before the First World War, where perhaps China, America, and the Russian Federation carve up the world. I think that perhaps that's how he sees things. I mean, you have to remember that Trump sees things in very reductive, simple terms, and there's no real long-term logic behind any of it. But what is true is that America's elite class knew that they were not getting an imperial manager, somebody who could cope with the intellectual complexity of managing America's position in the world, and who could manage a team who was skilled enough to maintain America's situation in the world. And they knew it doubly when Trump was re-elected last November, that there was going to be a precipitous decline in America's world situation. Why does an elite class do that? And it's not out of stupidity. The people that backed Trump this time, of course, there are the people like Elon Musk and the kind of the various kind of Silicon Valley tech money people, but also Wall Street did, and individual funders, like, for example, the widow of Sheldon Adelson, who was one of Trump's long-time backers and supporters. You have people with serious money backing somebody who is not an effective manager, and not is going to be an effective manager of American empire. And my argument as to why this happens is because of the lesson of 2008. And it was a lesson that was no less profound than the lesson of 1929. Different conclusions were drawn in 1929, and those conclusions in 2008 were considered to be heretical and unpalatable. Let's look at the conclusions drawn in 1929. The conclusions drawn in 1929 were that, and these are essentially broadly Keynesian conclusions, the argument that Roosevelt's a socialist that was bandied around at the time is a nonsensical idea. Roosevelt was committed to the capitalist system to the extent that he saw the state as the primary tool to intervene to stabilize it. And without that, as most economists from Adam Smith to Karl Marx predicted, capitalism itself would kind of devour itself. So that was the lesson really drawn in 1929, that without a state to kind of tame the most extreme aspects of the American capitalist system, without some kind of redistribution, the provision of work and social welfare for a destitute working class, the kind of the reduction in sort of capitalism's sharpest practices, the mass mobilization of workers and capital, things like the Tennessee Valley Authority to build hydroelectric dams, that kind of thing. Without that, capitalism would devour itself, and you have two very hungry competitors in the 1930s, rising fascism across Europe and Soviet communism. So it's not a safe world for liberal capitalism at all. Of course, by the time we get to 2008, it's a much safer world, and the iteration of capitalism that we have is much less liberal, much less pluralistic. The end of the Cold War had shown, in this kind of Fukuyama-style end of history kind of moment, had shown the center and the political right in America, the Democrats and the Republicans, that they had no longer anything to fear from any kind of left revolutionary politics. Not that they had really had anything to fear at all. The various Red Scares from the 1920s and the 1940s and 50s were precisely that. They were scares. They were not based in any objective reality. American capitalism has been, throughout the 20th century, exceedingly secure, and it has suffered no meaningful rivals at all in America. But the end of the Cold War showed that not only that was there no threat from anything approaching kind of socialist politics, but also that the gains that had been given to the working classes throughout the 20th century, and this doesn't just apply to America, it applies to all first world countries with any semblance of social welfare, that the gains that they had benefited from throughout the 20th century, which had been really a sop to prevent revolution, could now be rolled back. This is why life for working class people in America since the end of the Cold War has got progressively worse. There is literally no reason to preserve any of the institutions that made working class life bearable. And so we have this enormous squeeze on incomes. And this is a part of the kind of like the neoliberal era of the 1990s. So when we get to 2008, the lesson that is learned by America's investor class, the people that have wealth, that generate independent wealth via ownership of assets and stocks and all that kind of thing, the capitalist class of America. The lesson that they draw from 2008 is that the system itself, which is deindustrialized, financialized, based on a mountain of debt, and based on accounting frauds all over the place. I mean, 2008 is really the product of accounting frauds, derivatives and complex financial products were really a means of selling bad debt as if it was good debt. I mean, watch The Big Short; it's all in there. But that's just the kind of like the summation of it. And it's not just an aberration in the system, a bad apple or some bad actors. It is the system. This is why it's a nationwide crash in America that triggers a global economic slump. And because America has deindustrialized itself since the kind of the late 70s, all the way through the 1980s, into the 1990s, into the 2000s, because offshoring American manufacturing is a one-time only, irreversible deal. You can't undo it once you've done it. Or if you do try to undo it, it will probably take the best part of 20 to 30 years to return America to the level that it was when you began the process. And that in an era of robotics, in an era where of short-term electoral cycles, in an era where China, having realised the West's epic mistake, ain't going to let them undo that one lightly. And in an age where the technical and engineering level within the workforce, the kind of industrial workforce itself, would need to be fundamentally rethought. And whether there's the political will for that is a big question. Trump talks a lot about bringing jobs back to America, but he must know. I mean, or at least there must be somebody in his White House with half a brain that knows the impossibility of that, and knows that American corporations are addicted to cheap labour, which is getting less cheap as well, by the way.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews all on the app. Download today.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
This is Paige, the co-host of Giggly Squad. I use Uber Eats for everything, and I feel like people forget that you can truly order anything, especially living in New York City. It's why I love it. You can get Chinese food at any time of night, but it's not just for food. I order from CVS all the time. I'm always ordering from the grocery store. If a friend stops over, I have to order champagne. I also have this thing that whenever I travel, if I'm ever in a hotel room, I never feel like I'm missing something because I'll just Uber Eats it. The amount of times I've had to Uber Eats hair items like hairspray, deodorant, you name it, I've ordered it on Uber Eats. You can get grocery, alcohol, everyday essentials in addition to restaurants and food you love. So in other words, get almost anything with Uber Eats. Order now. For alcohol, you must be legal drinking age. Please enjoy responsibly. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
A deindustrialized West was predicated on the idea that there would be endless sort of economic returns from the West, America, Great Britain, particularly, selling themselves as centers of financial services. It is, of course, a bit of a silly idea when you think about it. And my conspiracy theory is often when people come up with patently stupid ideas, is it that they actually believe them at the time? Or is it that they think to themselves, well, it's kind of a stupid idea for you, but for a small subsection of society, it can work very well. And that's where we look at kind of remodeling societies into a kind of a permanent underclass, which is in receipt of government welfare that is physically and mentally not very well because of the kind of the means of life and production having been shut down and eviscerated. And then we have a kind of a Starbucks kind of peasantry that serve the lattes, work in the call centres and hotel receptions. And they might do kind of okay, but they're never really going to be particularly wealthy. And then there's a financial elite. And this is essentially how the Western world has reshaped itself. And this hollowing out is how the Western world kind of, America leading the charge, but not alone, handed over the future to China by making China, and to some extent, other countries like Vietnam, but China particularly, the industrial superpower of the world. And it was only through industrialism that Great Britain and then the United States of America became the powers that they became in the 19th and 20th centuries, respectively. So, quite an own goal, really, historically speaking. So, in 2008, you have this elite that look to the future of diminished returns. And if you know that the pie, so to speak, isn't going to get any bigger, that it can't grow, that the systems that create growth have been killed, and that you know that the thing that you presented to the world was the illusion of growth, the images of extreme consumption that America kind of basked in the early 21st century, of wealth and conspicuous consumption, fast cars, fancy clothes, Learjets, and all that kind of stuff, is based on a kind of a fantasy. It's based on an accounting fiction. It's based primarily on debt, not just public debt, but private debt, the worst kind, and debt that is unserviceable. It's not based on making things primarily any longer. No, not say that there is no manufacturing in the American economy. Of course there is, but it's not the basis of the American economy. Financialization is. If you know it's all a scam, if you know it's all a fiddle, you know it's all nonsense, then you look to a future that's going to be a darker one, a future of diminishing returns, a harder future, a future that is going to be harder, but not for you. It's going to be harder for poorer people. And here's where Trump kind of makes a perverse sort of sense. It sort of doesn't matter too much if Trump makes a fool of himself and of America on the world stage, because America's elite classes aren't looking for a JFK. They're not looking for somebody to face down the Russians over Berlin. They are not looking for a Nixon to go to China and treat with Mao. What they're looking for is somebody who will keep the keep the kind of more nefarious side of American capitalism safely insulated. One, they're looking for somebody who will facilitate particular kinds of capital extraction or looting, for want of a better word. Two, they're looking for, and what they got in 2008, and this was not under Trump at all, this was under Obama, what in 2008, 2009, 2010, were the means by which big American capital, aircraft companies, car companies, could be subsidized, whilst at the same time the mantra of free market capitalism was still upheld. Banks could be bailed out, and it didn't look like a contradiction of all the things that neoliberals had argued, just because elite class people refused to accept that at the time, and their media commentators and their political stooges refused to do that. So having a more corrupt America, when America's future is not the future that existed in the 1960s, is, from an elite perspective, it's a good thing. It's a way of ensuring the future of an elite class, which is what kind of political corruption is always meant to do. The only other way of ensuring the future of an elite class is having a booming America.
Instacart is on a mission to have you not leave the couch this basketball season. Because between the pre-game rituals and the post-game interviews, it can be difficult to find time for everything else. So let Instacart take care of your game day snacks or weekly restocks and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Because we hear it's bad luck to be hungry on game day. So download the Instacart app today and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees apply for 3 orders in 14 days, excludes restaurants.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews all on the app. Download today.
That is going to, come back against all the odds and show that it is now able to take on and defeat economically China. And that's not going to happen. That's done. Sometimes you get this kind of capitalist relay. If you look in the kind of the long history of empires from sort of the 15th century onwards, you see a Spanish handover to the Dutch, a Dutch handover to the English, and eventually an English or British handover to the Americans. And in each of these times you get little characters that translate over. You get Englishmen on Wall Street. You get Dutchmen coming in the 17th century to England, and no doubt you will find wealthy Americans who are currently learning Mandarin and have mastered it very well, will appear in Shenzhen and Shanghai in the next few years. And that's the time where you can start to wonder whether there is not this handover of American capitalists saying, "Oh, gee, shucks, you've won," but people thinking, "Let's go where the money is. Let's go where the opportunities are." And it becomes a sort of an unofficial de facto sort of handover, where the people with money look upon really it being a kind of the continuation of business as usual, working in all this. So why you have a president who is so aberrant, so fundamentally different to anybody who has come before him, to some extent it's to do with this kind of angry plebeian uprising of Margot and stuff like that. But where does all the money come from? Because Trump hadn't got any. And it comes from people that see a future with Trump. It's not because there are, some of the Foundation and people like that are, avowed conservative reactionaries and nationalists, and there's an element of that in it. But they're also absolute ruthless realists, and they do what they do because they believe it to be in their interests. So there is my little pet theory about the meaning of 2008 and how it brings us Trump. There's obviously a heck of a lot more to it than that, and no doubt there are about a million facets of this phenomena that I haven't hit upon. Think of this as just one of them. But I'd love to know what you think. I really would. You can always find me on Twitter. I refuse to call it X, it's a stupid name. And I'm always there. And I'd love to, if you guys want to chat, please do. I might set up a Reddit at some point. It's a bit of a hassle to run, though, aren't they? So any volunteers out there, I'm all ears. But take good care, everybody. And there's some thoughts for you Saturday. And all the best. Bye-bye.
What makes a great pair of glasses? At Warby Parker, it's all the invisible extras without the extra cost. Their designer quality frames start at $95, including prescription lenses, plus scratch-resistant, smudge-resistant, and anti-reflective coatings, and UV protection, and free adjustments for life. To find your next pair of glasses, sunglasses, or contact lenses, or to find the Warby Parker store nearest you, head over to warbyparker.com. That's warbyparker.com.
Ever wonder what your lashes are destined for? The cards have spoken. Maybelline New York Mascara does it all. Whether you crave fully fan lashes with Lash Sensational, big, bold volume from the Colossal, a dramatic lift with Falsies Lash Lift, or natural-looking volume from Great Lash, your perfect lash future awaits. Manifest your best mascara today. Shop Maybelline New York and discover your lash destiny. Shop now at Walmart.